بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of After the Prophet, brought to you by the Ahlul Bayt American Society and Tasneem Institute. In our first episode, we examined a narration found in Sahih al-Bukhari where Umar ibn al-Khattab recounts the event of Saqifa. And in this narration, what's interesting is that Umar characterizes the pledge of allegiance to Abu Bakr as a falta. A falta means a hasty event, a hasty decision. And he says it was a falta waqallahu sharraha. It was a hasty event and it was something that was spontaneous. And he admitted that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had protected the community from its potential harm. He also goes on to say that this process should not be replicated in the future. He warned against future leadership decisions without proper consultation, which again implies that the pledge of allegiance to Abu Bakr at Saqifa Bani Sa'ida was done without proper consultation. This acknowledgement by Umar ibn al-Khattab indeed raises serious questions about the legitimacy of Abu Bakr's appointments. Right? If the assumption is that the Prophet did not appoint a successor, right, then when it comes to matters that are not decided by the Prophet, the general principle is going to be shura. Now, of course, the Shi'i narrative contends that the Prophet did indeed appoint a successor, and when it comes to things and matters that have been decided by Allah and His Messenger, there is no room for consultation or personal choices. But let us assume, for the sake of argument, that the Prophet left this decision to the community. What happened at Saqifat Bani Sa'ida contradicts the principle, the Islamic principle of shura, because the majority of the Muhajirin, and one can say that the majority of the Ansar as well, were not present at Saqifat Bani Sa'ida. The process at Saqifa did not represent the collective will of the broader Muslim community that stretched far beyond Medina. Now, one may wonder, why is it that the Ansar organized this meeting? Were they not present in Ghadir, where the Prophet ﷺ announced his successor, according to the Shi'i narrative? How do we understand the decision of the Ansar to go ahead and elect their own leader? My personal analysis, my dear brothers and sisters, is that it seems that the Ansar sensed that Ali ibn Abi Talib was unlikely to assume the Khilafah based on the events surrounding the Prophet's deathbed. Particularly when you look at the calamity of Thursday, when the Prophet was prevented from writing his will. They could sense that there are efforts being made to override and to sideline Ali ibn Abi Talib from the Khilafah. The Ansar also observed that some of the prominent Muhajirin had refrained from joining the army of Usama ibn Zayd. These indications fueled their intuition that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam would not succeed. And this prompted them to take matters into their own hands and elect their own leader. In their minds, okay, if the Muhajirin, if some of the prominent people in Quraysh, if they're going to prevent Ali from leading after the Prophet, we have to take things into our own hands and we have to appoint someone who will serve our political interests. Now, with that said, what I'd like to do in this episode is examine the event of Saqifa as narrated by At-Tabari. Now, why am I choosing Tarikh At-Tabari as the main reference? Number one, Tabari is unanimously recognized as the most important historian in the Islamic tradition. He wrote the most authoritative work on the universal history of humanity in the Islamic tradition. His book, Tarikh al-Rusul wal-Muluk, is a seminal work, and any Muslim historian will rely on this resource in any effort to reconstruct virtually any period in the history of Islam. At-Tabari was a Sunni, and he was not just a historian, he was a mufassir of the Quran, he was a jurist, but he was most well known for his tarikh. He actually provides the most detailed account of the event of Saqifa. He died in 310 after the Hijrah, so it is considered a relatively an old source. Now, according to this account, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the Ansar gathered in the Saqifa of Banu Sa'ida. Banu Sa'ida, they were a clan among the Ansar, and as we mentioned, the Ansar are comprised of two powerful tribes. You have the tribe of Khazraj and the tribe of Aus. This gathering takes place in the Saqifa of Banu Sa'ida, and the narration says that the Ansar comes together. Tabari mentions, he says that the Ansar gathered and they said, نُوَلِّي هَذَا الْأَمْرِ بَعْدَ مُحَمَّدٍ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. They come together and they say, let us appoint Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, who incidentally was the chief of Khazraj. He was not from the Aus, he was from the Khazraj. They say, let us appoint Sa'ad ibn Ubadah to lead this matter, to lead in terms of being the successor after Muhammad. So, وَأَخْرَجُوا سَعْدًا إِلَيْهِمْ وَهُوَ مَرِيضٌ. So they brought Sa'ad out, and on that day, Sa'ad ibn Ubadah was ill. When they gathered around Sa'ad, because he was ill, he said to his sons or one of his close relatives, he says to them, due to my illness, I'm unable to speak in a loud voice. I can't address the congregation. So I'm going to whisper to you, and you relay my words to the rest of them. So he would speak, and the man would, whether it was his son or a relative, they would memorize his words, and then the announcer would raise his voice to convey to the rest of the people the words of Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. So what does Sa'ad ibn Ubadah say to the Ansar? So this is kind of the first speech that takes place during Saqifa. He begins with the praise of Allah, and then he says, addressing the Ansar, Ya ma'shar al-Ansar, lakum sabiqatun fi d-din, wa fadilatun fi l-Islam, laysat liqabilatin min al-Arab. He says to them, O Ansar, you have precedence in religion and a distinction in Islam that no tribe among the Arabs possesses. He then highlights the unique contributions of the Ansar to Islam. He reminds them that the Prophet spent over a decade in Mecca inviting people to the worship of Allah, but only a few initially believed in him, and they were unable to defend him or defend his mission. And then Sa'ad says, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to bestow honor upon the Ansar. and He granted them faith in the Prophet, and He granted them the ability to protect Rasulullah and his companions and the religion itself. And the Ansar, he states, became the fiercest supporters against the Prophet's enemies. And they played a significant role in spreading Islam until all of the Arabs came into the fold of Islam. And it was through the efforts of the Ansar that the Arabs were subdued, that the Prophet was able to conquer Mecca and allow Islam to gain dominance in the region. And then he says that the Prophet left this world while he was pleased with the contributions of the Ansar. So here Sa'ad is making the case as to why the Ansar should be, that the Khalifa should be chosen from among them. So he concludes that the Ansar should lay claim to the Khilafah because they were the ones who strengthened Islam. They are the reason why Islam survived those tumultuous periods. Now, listening to the words of Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, the Ansar, they unanimously agree, they support his reasoning, and they express support not just for the Ansar to act as the successors of the Prophet, but they actually recognize the competence of Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, and they endorse him as the Khalifa of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, as Sa'ad is delivering this speech, the Ansar begin to discuss amongst themselves. And mind you, all of this is happening before the arrival of Abu Bakr and Omar and Abu Ubaidah, which we will discuss shortly. Among themselves, the Ansar ask a very, very important question. They say, what do we do if the Qurayshi migrants, right? We're the Ansar, okay, what are we going to say to the Muhajirin? Especially those Muhajirin from Quraysh who feel that they also have distinction and they have great merit. They will say, we are the migrants, the early companions of Rasulullah. We are his clan. We belong to the same tribe as the Prophet. So the Ansar ask each other, how are we going to reply to the Muhajirin if they make this argument that we were the early supporters of the Prophet? Yes, we were few in number, but we were the early supporters of Rasulullah in Mecca, and we are from his clan, we are from his tribe. So on what basis are we going to dispute with the Muhajirin? Tabari mentions the view of some of the Ansar. فَقَالَتْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ. Some of the Ansar, they come up with the following answer. They say, if Quraysh challenges us, if the Muhajirin challenge our right to leadership, فَإِنَّا نَقُولْ إِذَنْ مِنَّا أَمِيرٌ وَمِنْكُمْ أَمِيرٌ. We'll come up with a compromise. We'll say that from us is a leader, and you can have one leader from you. So one leader from us and one leader from you. وَلَن نَرْضَى بِدُونِ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ أَبَدًا. And this is the only concession that we will make. We will not be satisfied with anything less than this. So the ideal is to have one Khalifa from the Ansar, but if the Muhajirin and the Quraysh, if they fight with us, if they dispute, if they challenge us, the compromise, the bare minimum that we will accept, is that we will have one leader from us and they can choose one leader from themselves. فقال سعد بن عبادة حين سمعها هذا أول الوهن. Sa'ad ibn Ubadah was not pleased to hear this. He tells the Ansar that this is the beginning of weakness. If you're going to concede, then we're not going to be able to hold on to the Khilafah. Now, as these deliberations are happening at Saqifa, news reaches Umar ibn al-Khattab. Someone tips off Umar. So what does he do? he goes to the house of the Prophet. Why does he go to the house of the Prophet? Because Abu Bakr was in the house at that time. He goes to the house of Rasulullah. Who's in the house of the Prophet at the time? Bani Hashim, the wives of the Prophet. Ali ibn Abi Talib is there. You have some of the prominent Hashemites who are there. Umar rushes to the house of the Prophet. Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salam, he was diligently occupied with the burial arrangements for the Prophet. Umar, when he arrives at the house of the Prophet, he sends word to Abu Bakr that you need to come outside, come out to me. Abu Bakr replies, through the messenger that was sent, that tell Umar that I'm busy. Umar then, he insisted, saying that something has happened that requires your presence. What's noteworthy here, and this is something that all Muslims have to reflect on, you have to ask, why did Umar ibn al-Khattab only notify Abu Bakr? If this is something, if a decision is being made about the Khilafah, and this is a matter that concerns all Muslims, why is it that Abu Bakr alone is notified? Why wasn't Ali also notified? Why wasn't Az-Zubayr notified? Why weren't all of the other prominent companions? Why not Abu Dhar? Why not Salman? Why is it that only Abu Bakr was notified? This is something that has to be answered. So Abu Bakr comes out, and Umar, he informs Abu Bakr that the Ansar are gathering at Saqifa to appoint Sa'd ibn Ubadah as the leader. And he mentioned that there's a debate going on whether it should be a shared leadership model or there should be just one unified, one individual Khalifa between the Ansar and the Quraysh. So the two of them, Abu Bakr and Umar, again, without telling anyone else, the two hasten to the Saqifa. Along the way, they meet Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, and they decide to take him along. As they're rushing to Saqifa, they encountered two men, Uwaym ibn Sa'ida and Asim ibn Adi. These men were also from the Ansar. And when they saw Abu Bakr and Umar and Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah rushing, they said to them that, go back. For what you intend will not happen. They knew that these guys are rushing because they want to secure the Khilafah for the Quraysh. Abu Bakr, Umar, Abu Ubaidah say, no, we're not going to go back. So they proceeded to where the Ansar were gathered. Now the narration in Tabari mentions that when they arrived, as they were approaching Saqifa, Umar said, we came to them and I had prepared some words I intended to deliver. So Umar, as they were rushing, he was thinking about what to say to the Ansar. But when we reached them, Umar says, as I was about to begin speaking, Abu Bakr said to me, hold on, let me speak first. And then after I speak, you're free to say what you wish. So Abu Bakr, he gives a speech, and then Umar, reflecting on the speech that Abu Bakr gave, Umar said that there was nothing that I intended to say except that Abu Bakr had already mentioned it, or in fact added even more information. So Umar said that I was very pleased with what Abu Bakr mentioned in his speech. Now what did Abu Bakr say upon arriving at Saqifa? Tabari mentions that he begins with the praise of Allah, and then he recounts how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet calling the people to monotheism. And then he goes on to highlight the unique role of the early Muhajirin. And then about the Muhajirin, because Umar and Abu Bakr, they're technically, they belong to the Muhajirin. So Abu Bakr does something very interesting here. He recognizes the merits of the Ansar, but he doesn't say that the Muhajirin are better than the Ansar. He highlights a certain group of the Muhajirin. He says about the Muhajirin, فَهُمْ أَوَّلُ مَنْ عَبَدَ اللَّهَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَآمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَبِالرَّسُولِ. He begins by recounting and enumerating the virtues of the early Muhajirin. He says that they were the first to worship Allah and to believe in Allah. You know what's interesting is that all of the reasons that are given in Saqifa for the superiority of the Muhajirin, all of it applies to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib fits every description that was given by Abu Bakr. He was the first to pray with the Prophet. He was the first to believe in the Prophet. It's very interesting how these arguments are being used against the Ansar to secure leadership for himself and his companions. So about the Muhajirin, Abu Bakr says, فَهُمْ أَوَّلُ مَنْ عَبَدَ اللَّهَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَآمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَبِالرَّسُولِ. The Muhajirin, they were the first to worship Allah on earth and to believe in Allah and His Messenger. وَهُمْ أَوْلِيَاؤُهُ وَعَشِيرَتُهُ. The Muhajirin, they were the supporters of the Prophet. They were the kin of the Prophet. وَأَحَقُّ النَّاسِ بِهَذَا الْأَمْرِ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ. They are the most deserving of the Khilafah after him. So Abu Bakr says, the ones who were the first to worship God, the ones who were the first to believe in God, the ones who supported the Prophet, his kin, these are the people who are most deserving of the Khilafah. وَلَا يُنَازِعُهُمْ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا ظَالِمٌ. And no one would dispute such a matter except an oppressive person. And then Abu Bakr addresses the Ansar. وَأَنْتُمْ يَا مَعْشَرَ الْأَنصَارِ مَنْ لَا يُنْكِرُ فَضْلَهُمْ فِي الدِّينِ وَلَا سَابِقَتَهُمْ الْعَظِيمَةَ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. Abu Bakr says, and you, O Ansar, are those whose virtue in religion and great precedence in Islam cannot be denied. No one can deny your virtues and your merits. Allah chose you as supporters of His religion. رَضِيَكُمُ اللَّهُ أَنصَارًا لِدِينِهِ وَجَعَلَ إِلَيْكُمْ هِجْرَتَهُ وَفِيكُمْ جِلَّةُ أَزْوَاجِهِ وَأَصْحَابِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made your city the place of the hijrah. You are the ones who provided a safe haven to the Prophet. And among you are the eminent wives and companions of the Prophet. Notice how Abu Bakr does not mention Ahlul Bayt. He says that from among you that you have the wives of the Prophet. The majority of the wives are from the Ansar. He mentions the companions of the Prophet, but what you notice in none of his statements does he mention the Ahlul Bayt. He'll mention his Ashira. He'll mention his clan, his tribe, but he won't specifically mention the family of the Prophet. فَلَيْسَ بَعْدَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ الْأَوَّلِينَ عِنْدَنَا بِمَنْزِلَتِكُمْ. Notice Abu Bakr very tactfully says that after the early Muhajirin, there is no one who holds your position in our eyes. The only people who are superior to you are the early Muhajirin. Not all of the Muhajirin, the early Muhajirin. Al-Muhajirin al-Awwaleen. So, based on this, what is the suggestion of Abu Bakr? فَنَحْنُ الْأُمَرَاء وَأَنْتُمُ الْوُزَرَاء. We are the leaders because we're from Quraysh, and you will be the advisors in the government. لا تفتاتون بمشورة ولا نقضي دونكم الأمور. You will not be excluded. Abu Bakr gives them this assurance. He says, you will not be excluded from consultation, nor will we make decisions without you. Basically, we will give you a share of the pie. We will be the leaders and you will be the ministers and the advisors. فَقَامَ الْحُبَابُ بْنُ الْمُنذِرِ. Al-Hubab, he was one of the Ansar. He stands. He was not impressed with the speech of Abu Bakr. He saw it as a very politically conniving speech. So Hubab, he says, Ya ma'shar al-Ansar, amliku alaykum amrakum. Take control of your affairs, O Ansar. فَإِنَّ النَّاسَ فِي فَيْئِكُمْ وَفِي ظِلِّكُمْ. For the people are under your protection and in your shade. This is our city. We are the guardians of the city. This is our city. Take control of your affairs. وَلَن يَتَجَرَّأْ مُتَجَرِّئٌ عَلَى خِلَافِكُمْ. No one will dare oppose you. We are the numerical majority. This is our city. We are the residents of this land. وَلَن يَصْدُرَ النَّاسُ إِلَّا عَنْ رَأْيِكُمْ. And the people will act only according to your decision. So Hubab, he says to the Ansar that don't be intimidated by what Abu Bakr has mentioned. We have power. This is our city. We have a numerical majority. We are influential. And then he says, أنتم أهل العزة والثروة. You are the people of honor and wealth. وَأُولُو الْعَدَدِ وَالْمَنَعَ وَالتَّجْرِبَةِ. You possess greater numbers. You have greater experience. You have greater courage and bravery. وَإِنَّمَا يَنظُرُ النَّاسُ إِلَى مَا تَصْنَعُونَ. People will take the lead from you guys. The people are watching to see what you do. فَلَا تَخْتَلِفُوا فَيَفْسُدَ عَلَيْكُمْ رَأْيُكُمْ. Do not disagree, or your unity will dissolve. And then he says, these people, أَبَا هَؤُلَاء إِلَّا مَا سَمِعْتُمْ فَمِنَّا أَمِيرٌ وَمِنْكُمْ أَمِيرٌ. Hubab, he starts out very strong, but then he ends weak. He said, these people, they insist on what you've heard. They insist that we have all of these merits. And if they're adamant about being leaders, so let it be. فَمِنَّا أَمِيرٌ وَمِنْكُمْ أَمِيرٌ. One leader from us and one leader from them. So again, they revert back to their compromise. When Umar hears this proposal of a shared leadership, what does he say? This is where Umar chimes in. فَقَالَ عُمَرْ هَيْهَاتٍ. He says, never, far-fetched is this proposition. لَا يَجْتَمِعُ اثْنَانْ فِي قَرْنٍ. Two leaders cannot share one crown. We need one leader. We cannot have a Khalifa for the Ansar and a Khalifa for the Muhajirin. We need one leader. وَاللَّهِ لَا تَرْضَى الْعَرَبُ أَن يُؤَمِّرُوكُمْ وَنَبِيُّهَا مِنْ غَيْرِكُمْ. He says, by Allah, the Arabs will never accept that you should lead while their prophet is not from among you. Umar is saying that the Arabs are not going to be pleased. Question, how about the pleasure of Allah? How about the pleasure of the prophet? The highest consideration is being given to what is pleasing to the Arabs or what is not pleasing to the Arabs. So Umar says the Arabs will never accept that you should lead while their prophet is not from among you. The prophet is from Quraysh. You guys are not Quraysh. Yes, we respect you. You are the Ansar. But you guys do not belong to this prestigious tribe. So Umar ibn al-Khattab argues that the Arabs would not oppose granting leadership to those from whom prophethood originated. Rasulullah is from Bani Hashim. Bani Hashim is from a clan that belongs to the tribe of Quraysh. Quraysh will accept Khilafah to be from the place that prophethood originated from, and who have historically governed them. Umar also continues and says that historically in Arabia, Quraysh have always been the leaders. So we should not change something that has been accepted historically. And he asserts the Quraysh's clear and legitimate right to leadership. Right? So this is the way that things have been. And then Umar goes on to say that anyone who disputes this is basing their arguments on falsehood, and this is something that is sinful, and it's going to be a path that leads to ruin. Again, Al-Hubab ibn al-Mundhir, he urges the Ansar to assert their authority and not let the Muhajirin take away their rightful share in leadership. Again, he emphasizes the supreme contributions of the Ansar, and he says that, listen, based on the sacrifices that we made, we deserve the Khilafah. And Hubab even goes so far to say that if the Muhajirin do not accept us, then we can expel them from Medina. So Umar, when he hears this, so there's this heated exchange. فَقَالَ عُمَرْ إِذَنْ يَقْتُلُكَ اللَّهُ. When Umar hears that the Muhajirin are, Hubab is saying to the Muhajirin that if the Muhajirin don't accept us as the Khulafa of the Prophet, then we'll expel them, we'll banish them from Medina. Umar, he says, may God kill you, may God destroy you. And then Hubab retorts, بَلْ إِيَّاكَ يَقْتُلْ. No, may God destroy you. So now you have threats being thrown from one companion to another. فَقَالَ أَبُو عُبَيْدَةَ. Abu Ubaidah, he says, he makes a statement, he says, يَا مَعْشَرَ الْأَنصَارِ. He addresses the Ansar, saying, إِنَّكُمْ أَوَّلُ مَنْ نَصَرَ وَآزَرَ. O Ansar, you were the first to support and aid Islam. فَلَا تَكُونُوا أَوَّلَ مَنْ بَدَّلَ وَغَيَّرَ. So don't be the first to alter and to change the truth, to change what is fair and just. At this point, Tabari mentions that Bashir ibn Saad, who was one of the Ansar, who belonged to the tribe of Al-Khazraj, he breaks ranks with the Ansar. He turns to the Ansar and he says that our early contributions to Islam, our fight against the polytheists, all of this was done for the sake of Allah. And we should not use these contributions as leverage. We should not use it as the basis for seeking worldly benefits. So Bashir, he basically argues, so again, this is a turning point in Saqifa. So the Ansar were united, and then Bashir ibn Saad says that, listen, the Prophet ﷺ, he's from Quraysh, and his people are more entitled to leadership. And he refuses to contest Quraysh on this matter. So he urges the Ansar, he's one of the Ansar, he urges the Ansar to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and avoid opposition to Quraysh and to abandon dispute with Quraysh over leadership. At this moment, when Abu Bakr sees that one of the Ansar has broken ranks, he capitalizes on this moment. What does he do? فَقَالَ أَبُو بَكْرَ هَذَا عُمَرْ وَهَذَا أَبُو عُبَيْدَةَ فَأَيُّهُمَا شِئْتُمْ فَبَايِعُوا. Abu Bakr, he puts forward two candidates for the Khilafah. Now again, on what authority, on what basis does he have the right to do this? That's something that we have to reflect on. Abu Bakr said, this is Umar and this is Abu Ubaidah. So choose whichever of them you wish and pledge allegiance to him. Tabari, he says, فَقَالَ لَا وَاللَّهِ لَا نَتَوَلَّى هَذَا الْأَمْرَ عَلَيْكَ. Umar and Abu Ubaidah, they say, by Allah, we will not assume this matter over you. For you are the best of the Muhajirin. You are the second of the two when you were in the cave. and you are the one appointed by Rasulullah to lead the prayer. And prayer is the most important aspect of the religion of Islam. Now, as we mentioned in our seerah of the Prophet, this is not an accurate statement. There are many discrepancies in those narrations that discuss Abu Bakr leading prayer when the Prophet was on his deathbed. So Umar and Abu Ubaidah, they say that, listen, we don't deserve to precede you or take this matter over you, that you are the most qualified person to lead. And this is where Umar, he says to Abu Bakr, ibsut yadaka nubayu'uk. Stretch out your hand so we can pledge allegiance to you. When Umar utters these words, Bashir ibn Saad, the Ansari who broke ranks with his fellow clansmen, when he saw that the Ansar were about to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr, he rushed. He wanted to be the first among the Ansar to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr, perhaps to gain political favor with the new government. When Hubab ibn al-Mundhir sees that Bashir was the first one, he rushes to give bay'ah to Abu Bakr, he criticizes him. He says that you were just jealous of your cousin Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. And because you didn't want him to be the Khalifa, you were willing to go with any alternative just so that he doesn't become the Khalifa. So of course Bashir denied this, and he said that, listen, I don't want to dispute with Quraysh. This is a right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted them. Now, it's important for us to understand that historically, there was always tension between the A.B.A.S and the Khazraj. And the A.B.A.S were always worried that the Khazraj would rise to power and assert their dominance over them. So when there was a break in the ranks of the Khazraj, to prevent the Khazraj from gaining power, the A.B.A.S rushed to give bay'ah to Abu Bakr. So to prevent Khazraji dominance over the A.B.A.S, they quickly pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr, and this broke the unity of the Khazraj and shattered their plans to make Sa'ad ibn Ubadah the leader. So this is exactly what transpired according to At-Tabari at Saqifa. Now, what happened in the aftermath of Saqifa? How is the new Khalifa going to secure the allegiance of the prominent Muhajirin and the wider Muslim community? Inshallah, we'll discuss that in our next episode. وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.